Middlesex's Joe Denley batted for 3 hours on the final afternoon of the LV County Championship clash at Durham to see his side home for an important draw. Rain had ruined Durham's push for victory on the previous day. They resumed their second innings on the last morning on 89 for 1, giving them a lead of 152, but they lost Keaton Jennings in the day's fifth over. Having advanced from his overnight 28 to 35, he sliced a drive off Gareth Berg to Denley at 98 for 2. Durham were nearly set back further, with Will Smith being close to being run out after a mix-up in the calling with Scott Borthwick. Borthwick is making a name for himself at number 3, and he again looked in good nick. Some would have expected Durham to go out with all guns blazing to set a target as soon as possible, but Paul Collingwood would have remembered his last declaration on this ground when he set Yorkshire 336 from 103 overs, a target they reached easily thanks to some bloke called Root. Borthwick and Smith now advanced the score along to 147 for a lead of 210, but then the latter top-edged a pull off Toby Rowland-Jones and was well held by a running David Milan. Had Ben Stokes stayed in for long, then perhaps the declaration would have been made earlier, but instead he lasted only half a dozen deliveries before he gave himself out, LBW, before too late changing his mind after a brief stroll. So Collingwood batted on into the middle session, with Borthwick going on to complete his third 50 of the campaign, one of which he converted into 100. He'd needed 102 balls for this one, and with it in the bag, it was surely now time to press on. In doing that, Collingwood perished 15 minutes after lunch, caught at third man off an uppercut off James Harris, Sam Robson with the catch. Phil Mustard then hammered Berg out to Corey Collymore to go for 3, leaving it to Gareth Breeze to add some impetus with a flick 6 off Berg. Now things were moving along, with all sorts of things happening. Borthwick took one in the guts and was also almost run out. By and large, however, he was by now striking the ball really well, and the umpire was probably thankful that the stumps, rather than his shins, got in the way of this pile driver. The declaration arrived at 240 for 6, with Borthwick on 82, and that left Middlesex a target of 304 in 51 overs. More realistically, that's how long they had to survive for the draw after losing Robson in the second over, with a nick off Callum Thorpe behind. For the next hour or so, the match appeared to be heading nowhere, although there were moments of concern from time to time for the batsman. Denley survived that and then responded with a couple of very pleasing drives. With the target way out of reach, Denley and Chris Rogers just had to bat as if this was the first day of the match, rather than the last one, just keeping an eye on the overs ticking away. Rogers has been in such situations many times before, and he was able to make use of the attacking Durham fields. At least Collingwood knew that by delaying his declaration, his side had no real chance of losing from here, even with Rogers finding the boundary on numerous occasions. There was still something in the pitch for the bowler prepared to put his all into his deliveries, and so, even with Rogers and Denley going along nicely, Durham hadn't given up hope. Collingwood has a tremendous record of winning games since he took over as captain from Mustard during last season's campaign. A 9th win in 13 championship games was looking difficult though, as Rogers went on to his 50, secured with a bottom edge for 4. 26 overs were still left though when he was trapped in front by Mark Wood for 54 at 96 for 2. And there were 21 remaining when Milan, not for the first time this season, was bowled after deciding to shoulder arms. 5 overs later and Graham Onion saw off Neil Dexter with an edge behind. Before he also had John Simpson well held low down by Borthwick. Now Durham believed they'd reduced Middlesex to 129 for 5 and had 15.5 overs to get the rest out. Berg was then beaten all ends up, relieved not to have got an inside edge through to the keeper, while Denley edged Onions but just short of Borthwick in the slips. For the most part though, Denley kept his composure under some pressure and hit the ball to the ropes when he could. This was turning out to be his best innings of the summer, and a very significant one too. He was able to secure his second 50 of the season, this one coming from 100 deliveries. It was those deliveries used up which were just as important as his runs. There was one more moment of worry for the visitors when Berg turned this ball from Wood straight to Jennings with 26 balls of the game remaining. But Denley held firm, just to reach his best score of the summer of 73 not out off 135 balls in a shade over 3 hours. Middlesex ended on 165 for 6, the kind of score which may have some asking why Collingwood didn't declare earlier. The 8 points his team earned, however, does keep them well placed in the table and gave Middlesex no chance of increasing their lead at the top. In fact, after taking just 6 points from this contest, they've now lost top spot to Sussex, who also have a game in hand on both of these teams.